Well, thank you for coming out.
All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good
morning.
Great to see this great crowd on a Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., right after Memorial Day. Pretty awesome. Senator Reagan and I are here. I'm Sharon Steckman. We're here excited to introduce a candidate for president. And I was reading up on him. I met Governor Bullock last year at the Capitol. He's done a lot for Iowa, and he's certainly done a lot for the state of Montana. They have pretty much the same demographics as we do in the legislature, about 2/3 Republican. And he has managed to expand Medicaid to 100,000 Montanans. 10%, so they have their health care coverage. He made public education a priority, which is dear to my heart. Protected women's rights, which with a solid Republican legislature was tough to do, but he managed to do that. Let's see, public lands. I don't want to leave anything out here.
I won't have to speak if you keep going. This is perfect.
All right. But I'm excited. In 2016, he beat Trump's numbers. Trump won by 20 points over Clinton, and they crossed over and voted for Governor Bullock. So with no further ado, Senator Reagan and I would like to introduce Governor Bullock.
Thanks, Representative. Oh, did I just scare you? I'm almost loud enough that I don't need this. But thanks, Representative. Thanks, Senator. Thanks, all of you, for coming out on a Tuesday morning. You know, I know that you have a few candidates that stop by and they try to make attenuated connections to Iowa. So I'm not going to tell you that my great-great-grandpa settled in Henry County or my mother was born in Ottumwa, both which is true. No, you don't come for that. Fundamentally, I think we gather for one reason. Can you hear me equally without it? No? All right, good. You know, we gather for one reason, for the sake of our country, for the sake of our country standing in the world, and for the sake of the America that we're passing off to our kids and grandkids. We gather to make sure that Donald Trump isn't reelected come November.
Yeah! Woo!
I know, though, that's not the only reason why we gather. Some of you gather because you've seen firsthand how the economy isn't working for everybody. We're working harder, we're actually making less. The average American hasn't had a pay increase in the last 40 years. Or if you're a parent, like I am, or a grandparent, you know, back in the 1970s, 90% of 30-year-olds were doing better than their parents were at age 30. Today, it's only half. You look at the economy, and 2/3 of the counties in our country actually lost businesses in the last decade. You shouldn't have to leave your community, your church, your home, just to have a decent job. So we gather to try to say we could actually do a lot better in this economy. And you also may gather because you look at this political system and it doesn't actually add up to making life better. Dark money is coming in more and more than ever before. Before Citizens United, 2% of the spending was from groups that didn't disclose their donors. This last election, it was over half. We see tax bills written to make donors happy. We see environmental laws being gutted, ultimately because that's what the polluters and the donors want. No wonder folks are frustrated. No wonder folks are anxious. No wonder folks are angry at times. But Donald Trump, instead of doing something about that, he's pouring gasoline on this fire. We are more divided now than we've ever been, certainly in my lifetime. And forget cable news or forget Twitter. You can't even have those conversations around a Thanksgiving dinner without politics dividing us. And that's, from my perspective, not the promise of America. We are so much better than that. Look, I was raised in a single-parent household, paycheck to paycheck. Only knew there was a governor's house in town because it was in the neighborhood and I delivered newspapers to it. So I've made it 4 blocks in life. But I worked my way through college and I borrowed my way through law school. I'll never forget the day that my wife and I wrote that last student loan check for what was $170,000 in today's dollars. But you know what? I had a shot from delivering the newspapers to the governor's house to raising my 3 kids in it. And for far too many people in this country, that shot no longer exists. And fundamentally, for far too many folks in this country, that shot fair shot at that better life that American dream never has existed. That's why we certainly have to beat Donald Trump come November. But we also have to start bridging some of the divides, taking some of the corporate money out of it, so the economy, the political system works for all of us, not just the Trumps and the Koch brothers of the world. And I think that why there's so much excitement this cycle, why you have so many folks coming through, is that we know that we can do it. We know that we can do it if we take the right steps. But first things first, we got to make sure that we beat Donald Trump. And we got to be honest with ourselves. If we don't change our strategy, if we don't win back some of the places that we lost, if we don't give people a reason to vote for us, not just against him, he could win again. I believe we can do it because I've seen it done before. As the representative mentioned, 2016, I was the only Democrat in the country to get reelected statewide in a state where Donald Trump won. Trump took Montana by 20, I won by 4. 25 to 30% of my voters voted for Donald Trump. And fundamentally, if we don't focus in part on places that we lost, if we can't make connections, we're not going to win. We have a lot of great candidates in this race. It's the only one that actually won in a state where Trump won when Trump was on the ballot. I know that we got to reach out to more than just the patches of blue if we're ever going to win again. I'm like the 37th candidate in this race. I just announced about 2 weeks ago, and somebody said, well, what took you so long? I didn't have a job to do. My legislature ended right the day before your alls did, and then they left 300 bills on my desk for me to either sign or veto after they left. But I had to go. And look, I know it's a time of great division. But I fundamentally believe even in a time like this, government can work. And I believe it because I've seen it before. As the representative noted that my legislature's a little bit more Republican than Iowa's. But even with that, we expanded Medicaid for 100,000 people. We reauthorized it just this last session. We got dark money out of our elections. And just this last cycle, we were the 3rd state in the country to actually ban all foreign money spending. We've made record investments in our public education system. Frozen college tuition for 6 out of 8 years, unlike what you've done is defunding your Regents universities. We have the 4th lowest fees and tuition in the country, and that's by design. That's actually by investing in higher ed. We don't just limit it, though, to those college investments. You know that all kinds of folks aren't going to necessarily go to college. So we got to made both our 2-year colleges and our tribal colleges about professionally recognized certificates, apprenticeships, work-based learning. As a result, more folks are climbing that ladder in the middle class at a rate in Montana than any other place in the country. I know that we can make it work. And I've done that by certainly reaching out, by trying to find common ground, but not compromising our values. 24th governor of Montana, more vetoes than any governor in the history of our state. Stopped every single attack on a woman's right to make her own health care decisions.
Yeah!
Stopped every attack on access, blocking access to either the ballot box or injured workers to a courthouse. Kept our public lands in public hands. And it vetoed every effort to strip workers from the right to organize and collectively bargain. How I win, how I govern, basically are the same things. Never forget when we were trying to get Medicaid expansion through. This was 2015. Kind of the heart of when anti-Obamacare. I went to a town called Shoto. Shoto's about 1,700 people. I lost that county by, I think, 40 points. Everybody in Shoto knew why I was going to be there because the Koch brothers were nice enough to mail every single household pictures with me and Barack Obama saying he's coming to ruin your life. But you know what? I showed up anyway. The first person at that community meeting was hospital administrator. He told me 43% of the people that walked through those hospital doors didn't have health insurance. A couple down the line was the county chairman. your county supervisors, our county commissioners. The chair of the county commission was from a town called Bynum. We call that a suburb of Choteau. It was 50 people. But he talked about how he was born in that hospital and how that hospital had saved his life. And he knew that if they lost that hospital, that town would be gone. So by me actually showing up, listening to them, not telling them what they need, that's what gave their local Republican legislator the courage to defy the Koch brothers, defy the party leadership, vote for health insurance, and every single vote mattered, and as a result we went from 20% uninsured to about 7.5% today. That's how government ought to work. And there's a lesson here, you know, whether it's Montana or Iowa, whether it's a Michigan or Wisconsin, we've got to make sure to reach out to places even beyond where they voted for us in the past. We've got to give people a reason to vote for them. I look at the county that you're in, and I'll be darned, it voted Obama, and then it voted Trump. We've got to not say, what's wrong with those folks that voted for Trump? We've got to say, why aren't we getting them to vote for us? Because if they're voting their educational interests, if they're voting their economic interests, if they're voting their conservation interests, they would be with us. We can do that. I think Montana could actually teach Washington, D.C. a lot. I'm not so naive, though, to say that this is going to be easy. And until we address the one thing that's holding us back in so many other areas, and that's outside money and outside spending, it's going to be that much harder to get Washington, D.C. to work again. Think about the way it's now captured. The tax cuts that were passed a year and a half ago, literally, a senator said, we got to do this to make our donors happy. $1 trillion of stock buybacks happened while 44% of Americans wouldn't have $400 in their pocket in case of emergency. These corporations have replaced a generation of workers with independent contractors, while union membership is half of what it was in 1980. Drug companies are some of the biggest investors in our system. We pay more for health care and prescription drugs than any other country in the world. We get less. And when you turn around and say oil companies and others are making record profits, Washington, D.C. can't even address the climate crisis in the slightest bit. There's a reason, because the incentives have moved elsewhere. Until we address that, we're never going to be able to get the rest of things done. I believe we can because I've seen it and I've done it. In Montana, we had a law called the Corrupt Practices Act of 1912. It had come about because we had wealthy mining barons called the Copper Kings, who had literally spent money and bought or influenced elections, local, state, national level. That law served us well. It banned all corporate spending in our election. Then came this case called Citizens United. Citizens United was the first case that actually said corporations are people and money is speech. And as a result, corporations could spend as much as they want to influence our elections, and there's nothing that we could do. Remember when that case came down in 2010? Democrats actually controlled both houses in D.C. and the presidency. We talked about it, we complained about it, people raised money about it, but we didn't do anything. And every other state in the country said, when that case came down, game over. In Montana, I felt I had an obligation for the last 100 years. I was Attorney General at the time. We actually billed a case. We got even Republican testimony talking about what even the threat of these expenditures could do. Took it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. First case after Citizens United. 5-4 decision. They sided with the corporate interests. They threw out 100 years of Montana law. Don't ever kid yourself what one justice can do for women's rights, for workers' rights, for democratic rights, for conservation rights. Again, I could have said I give up. But instead, I took another tack. I was governor. I worked with that 2/3 Republican legislature. We passed a law that said 90 days out from an election, I don't care what post office box you live in or if you call yourself Americans for America, you have to disclose every single nickel that you spend to influence our elections. Never forget, I was running in 2016 for re-election. Day 91 out from the election. Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity, were filling mailboxes with pictures that would make my 3 children embarrassed of me as a father. On day 90, it stopped. If we can kick the Koch brothers out of Montana, we could kick them out of Iowa, we could kick them out of every place across the country. Look, this is the most important election of my lifetime. And for many of you it is as well. How are we going to beat Donald Trump? But more, how are we actually going to preserve and build on this 243-year experiment called representative democracy? How can we make sure that what we hand off to our kids and grandkids is actually better than what we were given? Certainly starts by showing up. It starts by winning back some of the places that we lost in the past. It starts by giving people a reason to vote for us as Democrats. I believe we can do it. I'm an optimist. As a father of 3 young kids, you kind of have to be an optimist. But more than that, as an American, I think that's who we are. We know that we're actually at our best when we can listen to one another, not just divide into warring camps. When everybody has that shot, not just those that are wealthy. When we can give people a reason to believe that things can get better, not just pouring gasoline on what makes us anxious. I fundamentally believe that we can be that country again. That's why I'm in this. That's why I so appreciate you all coming out. And I'd be happy to answer almost any question.